I stood outside Riverside Memorial Chapel rain, soaking through my black suit as two security guards blocked my path. "Sir, you cannot enter," the larger one said, his hand firm on my shoulder. Through the glass doors, I could see Margaret's casket surrounded by white roses, our son Matthew standing at the podium. "But that's my wife," I whispered, my voice breaking. The guard's grip tightened. "We have strict orders from Matthew Henderson. You're not welcome here." That's when I knew my own son had orchestrated my worst nightmare. The rain had turned into a downpour matching the storm raging inside my chest. I tried to sidestep the security guard, my dress shoes slipping on the wet concrete. "Please, you don't understand. Margaret and I were married for 46 years. I need to be in there." The second guard, younger with cold blue eyes, moved to block my other side. "Mr. Henderson, we've been instructed to prevent your entry. Please don't make this difficult." Difficult? My wife was lying in a casket not 50 feet away, and these strangers were telling me I couldn't say goodbye. Through the chapel's glass doors, I could see the crowd of mourners, many of whom I recognized. There was my brother Frank near the front row, his gray head bowed. Margaret's sister Dorothy sat wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. Our neighbors, the Johnsons, were in the third row. "This is insane," I said, my voice rising. "That's my family in there. These are my friends." The larger guard's expression didn't change. "Sir, if you continue to cause a disturbance, we'll have to escort you from the property." I pushed forward, desperation overtaking reason. My hands reached for the door handle, but the guards reacted instantly. The younger one grabbed my left arm, while the larger one seized my right shoulder, spinning me around. In the struggle, my knee twisted, sending a sharp pain up my leg. "Let me go," I shouted, not caring who heard. "Margaret, Margaret." Through the rain-streaked glass, I saw heads turn. My brother Frank stood up, his face registering shock when he saw me being manhandled. But instead of coming to help, he sat back down, his eyes averting from mine. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain. That's when I saw her. Jennifer Matthews' wife stood just inside the doorway, watching the scene unfold. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment, her blonde hair perfectly styled, despite the humid weather. Our eyes met, and the corner of her mouth lifted in what could only be described as a satisfied smirk. "Get him out of here!" she mouthed to the guards through the glass. The guards dragged me backward, my injured knee protesting with each step. Other late arrivals hurried past us, umbrellas bobbing, careful not to make eye contact with the old man being forcibly removed from his own wife's wake. The shame burned almost as much as the anger. They hauled me across the parking lot to where my 10-year-old Honda Civic sat among the luxury vehicles. The younger guard released my arm, while the larger one maintained his grip. "Your vehicle, sir," he said, gesturing to my car. "I suggest you leave now. If you attempt to return, we'll contact the police." I fumbled for my keys with shaking hands, partly from the cold rain, partly from rage. "You're making a mistake. When this is over, when people find out what happened here today..." "That's not our concern, Mr. Henderson. We're just doing our job." They stood there, arms crossed, watching as I struggled into my car. My knee screamed when I bent it to sit down. Through the rain-covered windshield, I could barely make out the chapel entrance. But I didn't need clear vision to know they were standing guard, ready to intercept me if I tried again. I started the engine but couldn't bring myself to drive away. Not yet. Instead, I sat there, wet and shivering, watching the chapel windows. After about 10 minutes, I could see movement inside. Matthew had taken the podium, his tall frame unmistakable even from this distance. He was delivering the eulogy for the mother who had loved him unconditionally, while ensuring the father who had coached his little league team and paid for his college education sat in exile in a parking lot. The security guards remained at their posts, occasionally glancing my way. Other mourners inside seemed engaged with Matthew's speech. Some nodded. Others dabbed at their eyes. The funeral proceeded as if nothing was wrong, as if it was perfectly normal for a husband to be barred from his wife's wake. My phone buzzed. A text from my neighbor, Robert Johnson. "Lowell, why aren't you inside? Is everything okay?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. Nothing was okay. Nothing had been okay since Margaret's diagnosis 8 months ago. But this calculated cruelty. This was beyond anything I could have imagined. I typed back with trembling fingers. "Matthew has banned me. Security guards won't let me in." 3 dots appeared, showing Robert was typing. Then they disappeared. No response came. Even friends were choosing sides, and I was clearly on the losing one. After another 20 minutes, I finally put the car in drive. As I pulled out of the parking lot, something nagged at the back of my mind. In the chaos of being dragged away, I hadn't noticed it immediately, but now sitting at a red light, I reached for my keychain. The key to our safety deposit box was missing. It had been there this morning when I'd locked the house. Margaret and I had kept that safety deposit box at First National Bank for 30 years. It contained our important documents, some family jewelry, and bonds we'd purchased for our grandchildren's education. I pulled into a gas station and examined my keychain under the interior light. My house key, car key, and shed key were all there, but the small brass key with the number 27 etched on it was gone. That's when Margaret's final words in the hospital came flooding back. She'd been heavily medicated, drifting in and out of consciousness. I'd leaned close when she'd beckoned me with a weak gesture. Her voice had been barely a whisper, and I'd thought it was the morphine talking when she'd said, "Don't let them take what we built together." I'd assured her everything would be fine, that I'd handle everything. But now, sitting in a gas station parking lot, rain drumming on the roof, banned from my own wife's funeral by my own son, with our safety deposit box key mysteriously missing, I realized Margaret had known something I didn't. She'd known our son had plans, and somehow even in her final days she'd tried to warn me. The house felt wrong the moment I walked through the door. It wasn't just the emptiness left by Margaret's absence, though that hollowness echoed in every room. Something else was off, like when you know someone's been in your space, even though nothing appears obviously disturbed. I hung my wetsuit jacket on the coat rack and limped to the kitchen for ice for my knee. The funeral home's security guard had done more damage than I'd initially thought. As I wrapped ice in a dish towel, I noticed the coffee maker was unplugged. Margaret and I never unplugged the coffee maker. Small thing, but in 46 years of marriage, you develop routines. Moving through the house, I began cataloging other subtle changes. The living room throw pillows were fluffed and arranged too perfectly. And my study papers on my desk had been straightened into neat piles. Someone had been here, someone who'd tried to cover their tracks by making things appear better than I'd left them. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, each step sending a jolt through my injured knee. Margaret's jewelry box sat on the dresser, where it always had a carved wooden treasure her grandmother had brought from Germany. I opened it with trembling fingers. Empty! Not just the valuable pieces, but everything. Her mother's pearl necklace, the diamond earrings I'd given her for our 25th anniversary, even the costume jewelry she wore to church functions. All gone. I sank onto the bed, my mind racing. When had this happened? I'd been at the hospital with Margaret almost constantly in her final days, coming home only for short periods to shower and change clothes. After she passed 3 days ago, I'd been consumed with funeral arrangements or trying to make them before Matthew had shut me out of the process. The landline rang, startling me. I reached for the bedside extension. "Mr. Henderson, this is Patricia from First National Bank. I'm calling about your recent account activity." My blood chilled. "What activity?" "Sir, there have been several large withdrawals from your joint checking and savings accounts over the past week. I'm calling because they triggered our fraud alert system, but I see they were authorized with proper credentials." "How large?" The checking account was drawn down to the minimum balance of $100. The savings account had a withdrawal of $48,000, leaving a balance of $500. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. I didn't authorize any withdrawals. Neither did my wife. She passed away 3 days ago. I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Henderson. However, our records show the withdrawals were made by someone with full power of attorney, a Matthew Henderson. The room spun. Power of attorney? I never signed power of attorney papers. No, sir. According to our documents, Mrs. Margaret Henderson signed them 2 weeks ago. They give Matthew Henderson full authority over all accounts. 2 weeks ago. Margaret had been in the hospital barely conscious most of the time, pumped full of pain medication. I remembered Matthew visiting frequently during that period, always suggesting I go get coffee or take a break when he arrived. I need copies of those documents, I said. Of course, sir. You can pick them up at any branch during business hours. After hanging up, I immediately called Schwab, where we kept our investment accounts. The story was the same. Large withdrawals authorized by Matthew using power of attorney. Our retirement fund, built over decades of careful saving, had been pillaged. The account that once held $300,000 now contained less than $5,000. My hands shook as I hung up the phone. This wasn't impulse or grief-driven poor judgment. This was systematic theft, planned and executed while Margaret lay dying, and I sat by her side, oblivious. I needed air. I walked out to the back garden, Margaret's sanctuary. Her roses were starting to bloom their sweet scent, a painful reminder of all the mornings we'd had coffee on the patio planning our day. The garden shed stood at the far end, where she kept her tools and supplies. Something made me go inside. Maybe it was the memory of Margaret spending hours here when she needed to think. The shed smelled of potting soil and the organic fertilizer she swore by. Her gardening gloves still lay on the workbench, dirty from what must have been her last planting session before the cancer took her strength. On a high shelf behind bags of bone meal, I spotted something unusual. A leather journal I didn't recognize. Standing on a step stool, I retrieved it and opened to the first page. Margaret's handwriting shaky but unmistakable. For my beloved Lowell, if you're reading this, then my fears have come true. I sank onto the wooden stool she used when potting plants and began to read. The entries started 3 months ago. Margaret described Matthew and Jennifer's visits to the hospital, how they'd begun asking questions about our finances, about insurance policies, about the house. At first, she'd thought it was natural concern, a son wanting to ensure his parents' affairs were in order. But the questions had become pressure. Jennifer had started talking about how expensive Margaret's care was, how the treatments were draining resources. Matthew had mentioned how tough the construction business had become, how one bad quarter could ruin everything he'd built. One entry dated just 3 weeks ago made my blood run cold. Matthew brought papers today, said they were just formalities, things to make it easier for Lowell if something happened to me. I was so tired, so foggy from the medications. I signed some of them before the nurse came in and said I needed rest. Matthew seemed angry when he left. I'm scared of my own son. What kind of mother thinks that... The next entry was even worse. I heard Matthew and Jennifer talking in the hallway. They thought I was asleep. Jennifer said something about, once we have control, the old man won't know what hit him. Matthew laughed. That laugh so different from when he was young. When did my baby boy become someone I don't recognize? I turned the page with trembling hands. The final entry was dated just 5 days before she died. I've done what I can to protect Lowell and what we've built. Spoke to someone Matthew would never suspect, gave them the real documents. If you're reading this, my love, it means Matthew has shown his true colors. Look for Sarah. She'll contact you when it's safe. And remember Phoenix. Remember what we never told anyone about Phoenix. Don't grieve too long for me, my darling. Fight for what's ours. I love you beyond words, beyond time. Until we meet again. M. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. Even facing death, drugged and in pain, Margaret had been protecting me, protecting us. The safety deposit box key wasn't just missing. Matthew had taken it. But Margaret had seen it coming. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Your wife asked me to contact you after the funeral. Sarah. I stared at the message. Sarah. Margaret had mentioned looking for Sarah. But who was she? Before I could respond, I heard a car in the driveway. Through the shed window, I saw a Lincoln Navigator, Matthew's pride and joy. He and Jennifer were here, probably to search for more to steal, while they thought I was still trying to get into the funeral. I quickly tucked the journal inside my jacket and slipped out the back gate into the alley. As I circled around to where I'd parked on the street, I caught a glimpse through the living room window. Matthew was going through my desk drawers, while Jennifer examined something on her phone, probably checking account balances. They moved with practiced efficiency, like a team that had done this before. And maybe they had. How many other families had Jennifer infiltrated? How many other sons had she corrupted? I drove to a coffee shop several miles away and called the locksmith from the parking lot. If they had keys to my house that would change within the hour. Then I texted the unknown number back. Who are you? How do you know Margaret? The response came quickly. I was her private nurse the last month. She trusted me with something important. Can we meet tomorrow? I work at St. Mary's. Ask for Sarah Winters at the information desk. I agreed to meet her, then sat in my car thinking, Phoenix. Margaret had written, Remember Phoenix. We'd lived in Phoenix briefly in the early 70s when I'd worked on a defense contract. But that wasn't what she meant. I was sure of it. Then it hit me. Phoenix was Margaret's sister's middle name. Rose Phoenix Sullivan. She'd died 5 years ago, leaving Margaret a substantial inheritance that we'd never touched, planning to leave it for grandchildren. We'd opened a separate account for it at a different bank, telling no one, not even Matthew. That account might still be safe. As I started the car, my phone rang. Matthew. Dad. Where are you? I just left the funeral home. They said there was some confusion, and you left. I'm so sorry about that. The funeral director mixed up the instructions. Are you okay? The lies flowed so smoothly. If I hadn't just read Margaret's journal, if I hadn't discovered the empty accounts, I might have believed him. Might have thought it was all a misunderstanding. I'm fine, son, I said, keeping my voice steady. Just needed some time alone. Jennifer and I are worried about you. We're at your house now. Why don't you come home and we'll talk? This has been hard on all of us. I'll be home soon. I lied. Good. And Dad, I've been thinking. You shouldn't be alone right now. Jennifer and I have talked about it, and we think you should come stay with us for a while, just until you're feeling stronger. I knew exactly what that meant. Get me under their roof, under their control, and the rest of their plan would unfold. Whatever Margaret had done to protect us, whatever Sarah had for me, I needed to find it before Matthew tightened the noose he'd placed around my neck. That's kind of you, son. Let me think about it. Don't think too long, Dad. We only want what's best for you. After hanging up, I drove to a motel on the other side of town and checked in under a false name, paying cash. Tomorrow I'd meet Sarah and learn what Margaret had entrusted to her. Tonight, I'd plan my next moves carefully. Margaret had warned me. Now it was time to heed that warning and fight back against the son who'd betrayed every value we'd tried to instill in him. The boy who'd once cried when he accidentally stepped on a butterfly had become a man who'd bar his father from his mother's funeral while stealing his inheritance. But he'd made one mistake. He'd underestimated his mother's intelligence and his father's resolve. That mistake would cost him everything. The motel room was sparse but secure, and that's all I needed. I sat on the edge of the bed, yellow legal pad in hand, making lists of what had been taken and what might remain. My knee throbbed, reminding me of the afternoon's humiliation, but physical pain was nothing compared to the betrayal burning in my chest. At 10:30, I made my first call. Charlie Morrison answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes he'd supposedly quit. Lowell Henderson, I'll be damned. How long's it been? Too long, Charlie. Listen, I need your help, the kind you specialize in now. After the Army, Charlie had become a cop, then a private investigator. We'd served together in Vietnam, saved each other's lives more than once. That kind of bond doesn't fade. What's going on, brother? I told him everything. The funeral, the missing money, Margaret's journal. Charlie listened without interrupting, though I could hear him occasionally scratching notes. Your boy did all this, he finally asked. While Margaret was dying, Charlie, while I sat next to her bed holding her hand. Jesus Christ! Okay, listen, this is going to sound like a coincidence, but I'm already investigating your son. My grip on the phone tightened. What? Different client, different angle. Lady in Riverside claimed Matthew's construction company took her deposit for a kitchen remodel, then never showed up. When I started digging, I found a pattern. Your boy's been running a sophisticated operation. Takes deposits, starts jobs, then manufactures delays and cost overruns until people either pay more or give up. How long? About 2 years, right around when a Jennifer Winters entered the picture. Ring any bells? That's his wife. Yeah, well, she's got a history. 3 previous marriages, all to older men with money. First husband died in a car accident, suspicious circumstances, but never proven. Second had a heart attack after changing his will. Third one's in a nursing home, dementia lost everything to her. She's good at this, Lowell, real good. I felt sick. This wasn't just about money. This was about a predator who'd found my son and turned him into her accomplice, or maybe found a willing partner. Can you help me? Already on it. Give me 48 hours to dig deeper, and Lowell, watch your back. People who do what they're doing don't stop until they get everything. After hanging up with Charlie, I made my second call. Dr. Harrison, Margaret's oncologist, sounded surprised to hear from me. Mr. Henderson, I was sorry to hear about Margaret. I would have attended the service, but I wasn't notified about the arrangements. Another deliberate omission by Matthew, keeping away anyone who might question the narrative. Doctor, I need to ask you something. In her final weeks, did anyone request changes to Margaret's medication? A pause. That's... Actually, yes. Your son called several times, said Margaret was in too much pain, insisted we increase her morphine dosage. I was hesitant because higher doses would affect her coherency, but he was quite persistent. Said you were too emotional to make objective decisions about her comfort. And you changed them? Eventually, yes. He had power of attorney for medical decisions, provided the paperwork. But Mr. Henderson, I must tell you it troubled me. Margaret had specifically told me earlier that she wanted to remain as alert as possible for as long as possible. The dosage changes went against her expressed wishes. My hand trembled as I wrote notes. They'd drugged her into compliance, stolen her final days of clarity along with everything else. Thank you, Doctor. Would you be willing to provide a written statement about those medication changes? If it's necessary, yes. Mr. Henderson, is everything all right? No, Doctor, but it will be. My third call required more courage. James Richardson had been our squad leader in Vietnam, the steady hand that kept us alive through 2 tours. He'd used the GI Bill to get through law school, eventually becoming a federal judge. We'd stayed in touch through Christmas cards and occasional dinners, but I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. Lowell, good to hear from you. How's Margaret? She passed 3 days ago, James. Oh no, I'm so sorry. She was a wonderful woman. James, I need to see you. It's urgent. Can you make time tomorrow? What's wrong? I can't explain over the phone. Please. Something in my voice must have conveyed the seriousness. Come to my chambers at 2 o'clock. Federal courthouse downtown. I'll clear my schedule. After hanging up, I sat in the silence of the motel room planning my next moves. My phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number from Sarah. Mr. Henderson, be careful. Your son was asking about you at the hospital today. Seemed angry you weren't at home. So Matthew was already hunting for me. Good. Let him wonder where I'd gone. I made one more call, this one to Richard Steinberg at my old aerospace firm. We'd worked together for 25 years before I retired. Not Lowell, how's retirement treating you? Richard, I need a favor, a big one. Name it. I need you to run a security check on someone. Full background. Jennifer Henderson, formerly Jennifer Winters. That's your daughter-in-law, right? Unfortunately, can you do it? Richard had maintained his security clearance working on defense contracts. He had access to databases most people didn't know existed. Give me what you know about her. I provided what little information I had. Richard promised results within 24 hours. As I prepared for bed in that sterile motel room, my phone showed 3 missed calls from Matthew. No messages. He was getting worried, probably wondering why his carefully laid plans weren't unfolding as expected. I turned off the lights and lay in the darkness thinking about Margaret. 46 years of marriage, and she was still protecting me from beyond the grave. She'd seen what I'd been blind to, prepared for what I'd never imagined possible. Tomorrow I'd meet Sarah and learn what Margaret had entrusted to her. Tomorrow I'd see Judge Richardson and begin the legal counterattack. Tomorrow the father Matthew had underestimated would begin showing his son what happened when you mistook kindness for weakness. But tonight I grieved. Not just for Margaret, but for the son we'd lost somewhere along the way. The little boy who'd helped his mother plant roses had grown into a man who'd steal from her while she lay dying. That transformation was a tragedy all its own. My phone buzzed one more time. Charlie Morrison. Lowell, quick update. Just found out Jennifer's mother is in a nursing home in Nevada. Checked herself in 6 months ago with sudden onset dementia. Guess who has power of attorney, and guess whose bank accounts were drained right before she got sick? I stared at the text in horror. Jennifer wasn't just a predator. She was a serial killer who'd found a more profitable way to murder, and she'd taught my son her methods. The war metaphor wasn't lost on me. In Vietnam, we'd faced an enemy that used our humanity against us. Now, decades later, I faced an enemy that had used my love for my son against me. But just like in the war, I'd survived worse than this. And just like in the war, I'd learned that sometimes survival meant fighting back with everything you had. Matthew had made the call to bar me from Margaret's funeral. Now it was time for me to make some calls of my own. By the time I was done, he'd understand that there were some lines you don't cross, some betrayals that can't be forgiven, and some fathers you don't underestimate. The 74 missed calls he'd leave on my phone in the coming days would go unanswered. He'd chosen his path when he'd chosen to prey on his dying mother and grieving father. Now he'd walk that path to its inevitable end. The next morning brought clarity with the sunrise. I checked out of the motel early and drove to St. Mary's Hospital, arriving an hour before my scheduled meeting with Sarah. The cafeteria coffee tasted like burnt rubber, but I needed the caffeine to sharpen my mind for what lay ahead. Sarah Winters found me at exactly 9 o'clock. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with kind brown eyes that held a sadness I recognized. She wore purple scrubs and carried a manila envelope. "Mr. Henderson, I'm Sarah. Your wife was an extraordinary woman." We found a quiet corner table. Sarah glanced around before speaking, her voice low. "I need you to know I'm taking a risk meeting you. Your son has been asking questions about me about whether his mother gave me anything. I've told him no, but he doesn't believe me." "What did Margaret give you?" Sarah slid the envelope across the table. "She asked me to hold this until after her funeral, said you'd need it when the time came." She was very specific about the timing. Inside the envelope were 3 items that made my heart race. First, a notarized will dated just 4 weeks ago, completely different from the one Matthew had filed with the probate court. Second, a USB drive labeled "For Lowell Truth." Third, a business card for an attorney named David Chen, with a handwritten note on the back. "He knows everything. Trust him." "There's more," Sarah said. "Your wife asked me to record some conversations on my phone. She was more alert than people realized, just careful about when she showed it. She knew what was happening." "Do you have those recordings?" "They're on that USB drive along with videos she asked me to make. Mr. Henderson, your son, and his wife discussed increasing her pain medication to keep her unconscious. They talked about you having an accident, making it look like a fall. Jennifer even researched how much insulin it would take to cause a fatal hypoglycemic episode in a non-diabetic person. My blood ran cold. They hadn't just been planning to rob me, they'd been planning to kill me. Why didn't you go to the police? With what conversations that could be explained away, your son's a smooth talker, and his wife's even better. They'd have destroyed me, cost me my career. Your wife said to wait to give this to you after the funeral when they'd think they'd won. I pocketed the envelope carefully. Sarah, do you need protection if they're threatening you? I'm leaving town tomorrow. Already have a job lined up in Boston. Your wife made me promise to get away once I'd given you this. She said they were dangerous and she was right. After Sarah left, I sat in my car and inserted the USB drive into my laptop. Margaret's face appeared on the screen, thin and pale, but with fierce determination in her eyes. My darling Lowell. She began, If you're watching this, then Matthew has done what I feared he would. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better, but I've done what I can. The lawyer David Chen has everything properly documented. The Phoenix account is safe. Matthew doesn't know it exists. The account number is where we had our first kiss. The routing number is our anniversary. You'll know what those mean. She went on to detail Matthew and Jennifer's visits, their questions, their pressure. Then came the damning part. Audio recordings of Matthew telling Jennifer, once the old man's gone, we'll have everything. The house alone is worth $800,000. Add the life insurance, the investments were set for life. Jennifer's response chilled me. We need to be patient. My mother lasted 3 months after we started the insulin. Too fast raises questions. So Charlie had been right. Jennifer had practiced on her own mother. I drove to David Chen's office, a modest suite in a building that had seen better days. Chen himself was young, maybe early 30s, but his eyes held the sharpness of someone who'd seen too much too early. Mrs. Henderson spoke highly of you, he said, after I'd introduced myself. She came to me because she knew Matthew would never think to look for an unknown attorney in Chinatown. She was very clear about her wishes. He laid out the documents. The will Matthew had filed was a forgery created using a power of attorney that Margaret had signed under duress while heavily medicated. The real will, properly witnessed and notarized when Margaret was demonstrably competent, told a different story. She left everything to you, Mr. Henderson, with specific instructions. If Matthew contested the will or was found to have acted against your interests, he would receive exactly $1. She called it his Judas payment. Can this hold up in court? With the evidence she gathered. Absolutely. But Mr. Henderson, your son, has already started proceedings to have you declared incompetent. You need to act fast. So that was their next move. Drug my wife to steal her assets, then declare me incompetent to steal the rest. Clean, efficient evil. What do you recommend? We file the real will immediately. Then we go on offense. Criminal charges for fraud, elder abuse theft. Civil suits for conversion of assets. But first you need to protect yourself. They'll escalate when cornered. I thought about it. Margaret had set the board, positioned the pieces. Now it was my turn to play. Not yet, I said. First I'm going to give them rope to hang themselves. Chen looked concerned. Mr. Henderson, these people are dangerous. So am I, counselor. I've just been dormant for a while. Over the next week, I played the part Margaret had scripted for me. I returned home, but acted confused, forgetful. When Matthew and Jennifer visited, I mentioned forgetting where I'd put things, seemed uncertain about dates. I watched their eyes light up with each supposed symptom of decline. Dad, you left the stove on yesterday. Matthew lied smoothly. That's dangerous. I don't remember cooking anything. Jennifer exchanged a look with Matthew. Maybe you should consider getting some help. Someone to check on you daily. That's probably wise, I agreed, noting how quickly they'd moved from concerned to calculating. What they didn't know was that Charlie Morrison had installed cameras throughout my house. Every conversation, every searching glance, every moment they thought I wasn't watching was being recorded. On the 4th day of my performance, I made a calculated mistake. While they were visiting, I accidentally mentioned the life insurance policy Margaret had through her old employer. I need to call them, I said, pretending to search for the number. Margaret had a policy worth $500,000. Need to file the claim. Jennifer's hand twitched toward her phone. We can help with that, Dad. Why don't you let us handle the paperwork? Would I get so confused with all these forms? Of course. Where's the policy information? I made a show of looking through papers, then brightened. Oh, I remember. It's in the file cabinet in the basement, the green folder. They couldn't get to the basement fast enough. While they searched, I sat in my recliner, apparently dozing. The camera in the basement would capture them, rifling through my files looking for policies that didn't exist. Margaret never had employer life insurance, but they didn't know that. That evening, Charlie called with an update. Your boy's in deep financial trouble. His company's facing 3 lawsuits, owes over $200,000 in mechanics liens. He's been moving money frantically trying to stay afloat. Also, Jennifer's been visiting her mother twice a week. The nursing home says she brings homemade soup. Bet you can guess what's in it. Can we prove it? Working on it. Got a friend at the lab who can test the soup discreetly. If it contains what I think it does, we've got her for attempted murder. The next day, Richard from my old firm called back about Jennifer's background check. Lowell, this woman's a ghost. Jennifer Winters didn't exist before 15 years ago. Before that, she was Jennifer Paulson, and before that, Jennifer Marks. Each identity starts fresh after a husband's death or incapacitation. She's left a trail of bodies and empty bank accounts across 5 states. Send me everything. Already did. And Lowell? Be careful. Someone this experienced doesn't make mistakes often. When she realizes you're onto her, she'll move fast. That night I sat in Margaret's garden thinking. The trap was set, the evidence mounting. Soon I'd spring it closed. But first I wanted them to feel safe, confident in their victory. I thought about Matthew, about where we'd gone wrong. Had there been signs we'd missed? Or had Jennifer awakened something that had always been there, dormant and waiting? It didn't matter now. The son I'd loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who'd locked me out of my wife's funeral while planning my death. Inside the house, my phone showed another missed call from Matthew. Let him wonder. Let him worry. Soon enough he'd understand that the confused old man he thought he was manipulating had been playing a longer game. Margaret had protected me even while dying. Now it was my turn to honor that protection by finishing what she'd started. The boy who'd betrayed us would learn that some fathers retained their fangs no matter how old they got. And Jennifer. She'd preyed on the vulnerable for years, leaving a trail of broken families. But she'd never faced a man who'd survived the jungles of Vietnam, who'd built fighter jets that protected nations, who'd loved a woman smart enough to outmaneuver death itself. Their confidence would be their downfall. And when it came, when they realized the trap had already closed around them, it would be far too late for mercy. The game Margaret had started was entering its final phase. And I intended to win it for both of us. The summons arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic as I signed for it. The competency hearing was scheduled for Friday at the county courthouse. Matthew had moved faster than I'd anticipated, but that was fine. Margaret always said I did my best work under pressure. I called David Chen immediately. They've filed, Friday morning. I'll be there, he said. Do you have an attorney for the competency hearing? I was thinking of representing myself. Really sell the confused old man act. Mr. Henderson, that's not wise. Let me arrange someone. Trust me. Thursday evening, Matthew called. His voice dripped with false concern. Dad, about tomorrow. I want you to know this is for your own good. After what happened at the funeral home and with your recent confusion, Jennifer and I just want to make sure you're taken care of. I understand, son. I kept my voice weak, uncertain. Will you be there? Of course, we both will. And Dad, maybe don't mention that life insurance policy you were looking for. We couldn't find any record of it. Oh, maybe I imagined it. I've been imagining things lately. Exactly. That's why we're worried. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be fine. I hung up and looked at Charlie, who sat across from me at my kitchen table reviewing surveillance footage on his laptop. "He's smooth," Charlie said, "but listen to this." He played audio from earlier that day captured by the camera in my living room. Jennifer's voice. "After tomorrow, we'll have full control. Move him to Sunset Manor, sell the house within a month. I already have a buyer interested." Matthew's response. "What about my sister Carol's been calling?" "Let her call. By the time she figures out what's happening, it'll be done. Your father will be safely tucked away and will be managing his affairs." So they planned to warehouse me in the same facility where Jennifer was slowly poisoning her mother. Efficient. Friday morning dawned gray and humid-fitting weather for a son's betrayal. I dressed carefully in my old blue suit, the one that was slightly too large now, making me appear frail. David Chen met me at the courthouse steps, accompanied by a woman I didn't recognize. "Mr. Henderson, this is Amanda Rodriguez. She'll be representing you today." Amanda was perhaps 40, with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit. Her handshake was firm. "Mr. Chen has briefed me on the situation," she said. "I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good. For the first part of the hearing, I need you to appear exactly as they expect. Confused, perhaps a bit lost. Can you manage that?" "I've been practicing all week." The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Matthew sat at a table with his lawyer, a thin man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Jennifer sat behind them in the gallery, wearing a conservative dress that made her look like a concerned daughter-in-law instead of a serial killer. Judge Patricia Thornton presided, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed the petition briefly before beginning. "Mr. Matthew Henderson, you've petitioned for conservatorship over your father Lowell Henderson, claiming he's no longer capable of managing his affairs. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." Matthew stood. "It breaks my heart, but my father's shown increasing signs of dementia since my mother's death. He's confused, forgetful, and I'm afraid he's a danger to himself." "I see, and you have evidence of this." Matthew's lawyer presented his case. A doctor I'd never met testified via written statement that I showed signs of cognitive decline. The security guards from the funeral home submitted affidavits about my aggressive and confused behavior. Matthew himself took the stand describing fictional incidents of my supposed deterioration. "Just last week he mentioned a life insurance policy that doesn't exist. He's been leaving the stove on, forgetting to lock doors. He disappeared for an entire night after Mom's funeral. We found him at a motel, and he couldn't explain why he was there." I sat quietly, occasionally looking around the room, as if I wasn't quite following the proceedings. Amanda had coached me well, even suggesting I bring the wrong glasses to make me squint at documents. Matthew's lawyer concluded with financial records showing large withdrawals from my accounts, implying I'd been spending recklessly. Of course, he didn't mention those withdrawals were made by Matthew using fraudulent power of attorney. Judge Thornton turned to Amanda. "Ms. Rodriguez, does your client wish to respond?" "May we have a brief recess first, Your Honor? I'd like to confer with my client." 15 minutes. In the conference room, Amanda smiled. "They're confident. Good. Now we destroy them. Are you ready?" "I've been ready since they locked me out of my wife's funeral." When court reconvened, something had changed. I sat straighter, my eyes clear and focused. Amanda had helped me switch to my correct glasses. The confused old man was gone, replaced by the aerospace engineer who'd helped design defense systems. "Your Honor," Amanda began, "we'd like to present evidence that not only is Mr. Henderson fully competent, but that this petition is part of a larger scheme to defraud him of his assets." Matthew's lawyer objected, but Judge Thornton overruled him. "I'll allow it. Proceed." Amanda wheeled in a television and laptop. "First, I'd like to play a video recorded by Margaret Henderson shortly before her death." Margaret appeared on screen, frail but alert. The courtroom fell silent as she spoke. "My name is Margaret Henderson. Today is April 15th. I am of sound mind despite my illness. I'm making this recording because I fear my son, Matthew, and his wife, Jennifer, are planning to steal from my husband after my death. They've pressured me to sign documents while I was medicated, have spoken of putting Lowell in a nursing home, and have made plans to sell our house. I've taken steps to protect my husband, including creating a new will with attorney David Chen. If something happens to Lowell, if he's declared incompetent or has an accident, please investigate my son. This is not the child I raised. Something's changed him or perhaps revealed who he always was. Matthew's face had gone white. Jennifer's mask slipped, revealing fury beneath the concern. Amanda continued methodically. She presented Margaret's real will, the forged power of attorney documents, bank records, showing Matthew's theft. Then came the surveillance footage from my house, Matthew and Jennifer, discussing their plans, searching for non-existent insurance policies, planning my institutionalization. Your Honor. Amanda said, Mr. Henderson has been neither confused nor incompetent. He's been gathering evidence of elder abuse and fraud. His supposed symptoms were an act designed to expose his son's intentions. That's ridiculous, Matthew's lawyer sputtered. This is clearly... Furthermore, Amanda interrupted, we have evidence that Jennifer Henderson has a pattern of this behavior. She presented Jennifer's history, the trail of dead and incapacitated husbands, the drained bank accounts. Charlie's investigation laid out like a roadmap of predation. The courtroom erupted. Jennifer tried to leave, but a bailiff blocked her path. Matthew stared at his wife with dawning horror, perhaps finally understanding he'd been played too. Judge Thornton gavelled for order. When silence returned, she looked directly at Matthew with disgust. Mr. Henderson, I've seen many unfortunate cases in family court, but rarely have I seen such calculated cruelty. Not only is your petition denied, but I'm forwarding all evidence to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. She turned to me, her expression softening. Mr. Lowell Henderson, the court finds you fully competent and capable of managing your own affairs. I'm deeply sorry for your losses, both your wife and, in a different way, your son. But, Your Honor, Matthew began desperately. Bailiff, please detain Mr. Matthew Henderson and Mrs. Jennifer Henderson pending criminal charges. Contact Detective Morrison, who I understand is waiting outside with FBI agents regarding interstate fraud charges. The trap had snapped shut. Jennifer lunged for the exit but was quickly restrained. Matthew sat frozen, his world collapsing. As the bailiffs cuffed him, he looked at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Dad, how could you? I stood, my voice carrying the weight of every betrayal. You barred me from your mother's funeral. You stole from us while she lay dying. You planned to lock me away and take everything we'd built. How could you? They led him away in handcuffs, Jennifer cursing and threatening. The courtroom began to empty, but I sat for a moment longer, feeling Margaret's presence. We'd done it, my love. We'd protected what we'd built together. Amanda gathered her papers, smiling. Mr. Chen said you were sharp, but that performance was masterful. You should have been an actor. No, I said. Just a husband who loved his wife and a father who lost his son long before today. Outside the courthouse, Charlie waited with 2 FBI agents. They'd been monitoring the hearing, ready to arrest Jennifer on federal charges. Clean sweep Lowell. Jennifer's mother tested positive for massive insulin overdoses. She'll live but barely. Jennifer's going away for a long time. My phone buzzed. Carol, my daughter, calling from Seattle. I'd kept her in the dark to protect her, but now it was time to bring her home to rebuild what Matthew had tried to destroy. Dad, I just saw the news. Is it true about Matthew? I'm afraid so, sweetheart. Can you come home? We need to talk. I'm already at the airport. I never believed what Matthew said about you. Mom called me before she died, told me to trust you no matter what happened. Of course she had. Margaret had thought of everything, protected everyone she could. I walked to my car, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The competency hearing that was supposed to end my freedom had instead revealed the truth and set me free from the burden of pretending. Matthew would have years in prison to think about his choices. Jennifer would face justice for all her victims. And I would honor Margaret's memory by living the life she'd fought to preserve for me. The confused old man act was over. Lowell Henderson was back, and he had work to do. The news traveled fast. Within hours of the hearing, Matthew's carefully constructed life began collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. I sat in David Chen's office, watching it unfold through updates from Charlie and Amanda Rodriguez. The FBI frozen all their accounts, Charlie reported, scrolling through his phone. Every penny they stole is locked down pending asset forfeiture. The construction company's creditors are circling like sharks. Amanda added. The district attorneys convened a grand jury. Between the elder abuse fraud forgery and conspiracy charges, Matthew's looking at 25 to 30 years. Jennifer's facing life without parole for the attempted murder of her mother, plus whatever they can prove about her previous husbands. I should have felt satisfaction, but mostly I felt empty. This wasn't how a father should experience victory over his son. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters wanted statements. Friends who'd been at the funeral called to express shock and apologies for not intervening. I ignored them all until one name appeared, Robert Johnson, my neighbor. Lowell, I'm so sorry. We saw them dragging you away, but Matthew said you'd been making threats that they needed security for everyone's safety. We should have known better. It's done, Robert. They fooled everyone. Is there anything Martha and I can do? Just be good neighbors. That's all I've ever asked. That evening, Carol arrived from Seattle. My daughter looked exhausted, but determined. Her red hair, so like her mother's, pulled back in a ponytail. She dropped her bags and hugged me tight. I knew something was wrong when Matthew wouldn't let me help with the funeral arrangements, she said. Then when he told me you were losing it, that you'd become paranoid and aggressive, it didn't sound like you at all. We sat at the kitchen table, and I told her everything. She cried when I showed her Margaret's video, raged when she heard about the theft, and went silent when I explained Jennifer's history. How did we not see it, Dad? How did Matthew become this person? I've asked myself that every day. Maybe he was always capable of this, and Jennifer just showed him how. Or maybe greed can corrupt anyone if they're vulnerable to it. Mom saved you, Carol said softly. Even dying, she protected you. She protected all of us. The Phoenix account is intact. $3 million she inherited from Aunt Rose. Matthew never knew it existed. Carol's eyes widened. Mom mentioned Phoenix in her last call to me. Said to remember Phoenix if anything happened. I thought she was delirious. Your mother was never delirious. She was the strongest person I've ever known. The next morning brought a circus. News vans lined our street. Sunbar's father from Mother's funeral in inheritance scheme made for sensational headlines. I kept the curtains drawn and ignored the doorbell. Charlie arrived through the back door with updates. Jennifer's lawyer is trying to cut a deal. She's offering to testify against Matthew, claims he masterminded everything. Says she was just a victim of his manipulation. I laughed bitterly. She's practiced that routine before. How many husbands believed it? Well, it's not working this time. The FBI found evidence linking her to 2 suspicious deaths in Colorado and 1 in Arizona. Turns out your boy was just her latest mark, except he was a willing accomplice instead of a victim. That afternoon, Matthew's construction company officially filed for bankruptcy. Employees who hadn't been paid in months descended on the courthouse. One foreman told reporters, "We built quality homes for people while he was stealing from his dying mother. Makes me sick I ever worked for him." By evening, the first of the 74 calls began. Matthew from county jail, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Dad, please, you have to understand. Jennifer manipulated me. She said you were going to cut me out of the will. I was trying to protect what Mom wanted me to have. Dad, I'm sorry about the funeral. It was Jennifer's idea. She said you'd make a scene that it would upset everyone. Dad, they're saying I could get 30 years. I have children. Your grandchildren need their father. Dad, please pick up. I know I made mistakes, but I'm your son. Doesn't that mean anything? Each message grew more frantic. The confident man who'd hired security to bar me from Margaret's funeral was gone, replaced by a scared child who'd finally realized the magnitude of his choices. Carol listened to one before I could stop her. "Don't answer him, Dad. He made his choice when he locked you out of Mom's funeral, when he stole from you both. He's not sorry he did it. He's sorry he got caught." She was right, but it still hurt. Somewhere beneath the criminal was the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, who'd helped his mother plant roses, who'd cried at his grandfather's funeral. That boy was as dead as Margaret now. On the fourth day after the hearing, more news broke. Jennifer's mother had recovered enough to give a statement. She'd known her daughter was poisoning her, but had been too weak to get help. She'd been a prisoner in her own body, watching Jennifer drain her accounts and sell her possessions. "She's evil," the woman told investigators. "I gave birth to evil, and I'll testify to make sure she never hurts anyone else." Matthew's lawyer tried a different approach, requesting a meeting. David Chen and I sat across from him in a conference room that smelled of old coffee and desperation. "My client is willing to cooperate fully," the lawyer said. "He'll testify against Jennifer, return what assets remain, agree to any restitution plan. In exchange, we're asking for a reduced sentence, 5 years instead of 30. "No," I said simply. "Mr. Henderson, he's your son. My son died when he chose greed over family. The man in jail is someone else, someone who conspired to murder me for money. Would you negotiate with someone who planned to kill you?" The lawyer left empty-handed. That evening, my phone showed 23 more missed calls from Matthew. I deleted them all unheard. Carol had been busy while I dealt with lawyers. She'd arranged for a proper memorial service for Margaret at the church she'd attended for 30 years. This time there would be no security guards, no banned family members, just people who'd genuinely loved her. "Mom deserves a real goodbye," Carol said. "The funeral Matthew organized was about him, not her. This will be about celebrating her life." As the week progressed, the unraveling accelerated. Matthew's house went into foreclosure. His country club membership was revoked. Former clients sued for shoddy work and breach of contract. The life he'd built on a foundation of lies crumbled completely. Jennifer's situation was even worse. The FBI had connected her to 5 suspicious deaths across 3 states. Her previous identities unraveled, revealing a pattern of predation spanning 20 years. She'd left a trail of grieving families and empty bank accounts, always staying one step ahead of justice. Until now, the district attorney, a sharp woman named Helen Moss, called personally to update me on the case. "Mr. Henderson, I want to assure you we're pursuing the maximum penalties. What your son and daughter-in-law did represents the worst kind of betrayal. Elder abuse conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, forgery. We're throwing the book at them." "I appreciate that, Ms. Moss. My wife would too. I reviewed your wife's video testimony. She was a remarkable woman to have such foresight." "She was remarkable in every way." My phone buzzed again. Another call from the jail. This time against my better judgment, I answered. "Dad!" Matthew's voice was hoarse, broken. "Thank God, I've been trying to reach you." "I'm listening." "I need you to understand. After the business started failing, I was desperate. Jennifer showed me how we could borrow from the family assets just temporarily. I never meant for it to go so far." "You barred me from your mother's funeral, Matthew." "I know. I'm sorry." Jennifer said, "She convinced me you'd already turned against me, that you were planning to leave everything to Carol. I was protecting my children's future." "By stealing your parents' present? By planning to lock me away? By murdering me for insurance money?" Silence. Then, "I never agreed to that. When Jennifer mentioned the insulin, I told her no. I'm not a killer, Dad. You just married one and helped her rob the dying. That's so much better." "Dad, please, I'm begging you. Help me. I'll do anything." "There is one thing you can do, Matthew." "Anything. Name it." "Tell the truth. All of it. Every crime, every plan, every betrayal. Not for a deal, not for leniency, but because it's the right thing to do." The thing your mother would want. Can you do that? A long pause. If I do, I'll get 30 years. Then you'll get 30 years, but you'll get them with a clearer conscience than you have now. I can't. I have to think of my children. Your children need a father who takes responsibility for his actions, not one who keeps running from them. This is your chance to be the man your mother believed you could be. I need to think about it. You do that. And Matthew, this is the last time I'll take your call. Whatever you decide, you'll live with it. Not me. I hung up and blocked the number. Carol, who'd been listening, put her hand on mine. That was more than he deserved, Dad. Maybe. But it's what I needed to do, to close that door completely. The next morning's headlines brought fresh revelations. Jennifer had kept detailed records, apparently planning to eventually turn on Matthew, and claimed she'd been gathering evidence of his crimes. Instead, her meticulous documentation became evidence against them both. Sociopaths often can't resist documenting their cleverness, Charlie explained. She thought she was building an insurance policy. Instead, she wrote her own conviction. By week's end, the calls had stopped. Matthew had made his choice hiring a new lawyer who specialized in minimizing sentences rather than finding truth. Jennifer had been placed in solitary after threatening other inmates. The Henderson name, once respected in our community, was now synonymous with betrayal and greed. But in the ruins of what they'd destroyed, something new was growing. Carol had decided to move back from Seattle to be closer as we rebuilt our family without Matthew. The Phoenix account would fund scholarships in Margaret's name. The house would remain our home, filled with memories of better times. Mom would be proud, Carol said as we sorted through family photos, setting aside ones with Matthew. She saved you, protected the family legacy, and exposed the truth. Even in death, she was stronger than all of us. I held a photo of Margaret from our 40th anniversary, her smile radiant, her eyes full of love and mischief. She'd known then that something was wrong with Matthew had started planning, even as cancer consumed her body. My warrior wife fighting battles I didn't even know existed. The doorbell rang. A courier with registered mail. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Matthew's guilty plea to all charges. 30 years to life, possibility of parole after 25. At the bottom in his handwriting, "I'm sorry, Dad, for everything. Too little too late, but perhaps a start. Not at reconciliation. Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. But maybe in 30 years he'd be a different man. One who understood the price of choosing greed over love, manipulation over honesty, betrayal over family." I filed the paper away and returned to sorting photos with Carol. The past was done. Matthew had made his choices, Jennifer hers. Now it was time for the rest of us to choose how to move forward, how to honor Margaret's memory by living with the integrity and love she'd shown until her final breath. The 74 calls had been for nothing. Matthew's pleas had fallen on ears deafened by the echo of being dragged from Margaret's funeral. But in the end, he'd done one right thing, admitted his guilt. It wasn't redemption, but it was a start. And somewhere, I hoped Margaret knew that justice had been served, that her careful planning had saved not just my life and our assets, but the truth itself. The boy we'd raised was gone, but the family we'd built would survive scarred, but stronger, reduced, but not broken. The unraveling was complete. Now came the harder task, rebuilding from the ashes, creating something new from the pieces Matthew hadn't managed to destroy. It's what Margaret would have wanted. It's what she'd fought for. And it's what I'd spend whatever years remained making sure happened. 1 year later, I stood at the edge of Cannon Beach, Oregon, the same stretch of sand where Margaret and I had honeymooned 47 years ago. The morning sun painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, and Haystack Rock loomed majestically offshore, unchanged by the decades that had transformed us from newlyweds to grandparents to widow and memory. Carol stood beside me, her husband David holding their twin boys, Michael and James, who'd been too young to understand last year's turmoil. Frank was there too, my brother who'd found the courage to apologize for his cowardice at that terrible funeral. Sarah Winters had flown in from Boston, the nurse whose bravery had helped save me. Even Charlie Morrison had made the trip, trading his usual cynicism for respectful silence. In my hands, I held the ceramic urn containing Margaret's ashes. We'd had to wait for the legal proceedings to conclude for the forensic examination to confirm she hadn't been poisoned like Jennifer's other victims. She hadn't been, thank God. The cancer had been enemy enough. She loved it here, I said to the small gathering. Said the rocks were eternal like she wanted our love to be. I opened the urn and let the wind take her watching as she became part of the ocean she'd treasured. Some of the ashes swirled up, catching the light like tiny stars before disappearing into the endless blue. I liked thinking of her that way, not gone, but transformed, part of something larger and more permanent than any of us. "Goodbye, my love," I whispered. "Thank you for saving me one last time." After the informal service, we gathered at a small restaurant overlooking the beach. The twins played with breadsticks, while the adults shared memories of Margaret. Sarah told us about Margaret's determination in those final days, how she'd fought through the medication to create her video testimony. "She knew exactly what was happening," Sarah said. "Every time they increased her dosage, she'd wait until they left, then make herself throw up. It was brutal to watch, but she said she needed her mind clear to protect you." I hadn't known that detail. Even dying, even in agony, Margaret had been fighting for us. The depth of her love still took my breath away. "Any word from Matthew?" Frank asked carefully. "He writes sometimes," I admitted. "I don't open the letters. Carol does. She says he's in therapy, finding religion, all the things prisoners do. Maybe it's genuine, maybe not. Either way, it doesn't change anything." "The children still ask about their father," Carol added quietly. "We've told them he made bad choices and has to stay away for a while. When they're older, we'll explain more." Jennifer's trial had been a media sensation. She'd been convicted on multiple counts of murder and attempted murder across 3 states. Life without parole, served in maximum security. Her mother had testified against her, a frail woman whose survival was miraculous given the insulin doses she'd endured. She'd looked at her daughter one last time and said, "I wish I'd never had you." Even Jennifer had flinched at that. The Phoenix account had been transformed into the Margaret Henderson Foundation for Patient Advocacy. We'd funded programs to protect vulnerable patients from financial exploitation, hired lawyers to review suspicious power of attorney documents, created educational materials about elder abuse. In 6 months, we'd helped 17 families recover stolen assets and prevented 3 attempted guardianship frauds. "She would have loved this," Charlie said, reading about our latest case on his phone. "Using the money they tried to steal to stop other thieves. That's Margaret's kind of justice." After lunch, I drove alone to the vacation cabin Matthew had tried to steal. I'd thought about selling it, but Carol convinced me to keep it as a retreat, a place where good memories outweighed the bad. I spent the afternoon fixing the deck, simple work that cleared my mind. As evening approached, I sat on the porch with a beer, watching the sun sink toward the mountains. My phone, blessedly quiet these days, showed no missed calls. The 74 desperate attempts to reach me were history now replaced by a silence I'd earned through survival and patience. A car approached on the gravel drive. I tensed from habit, then relaxed as I recognized David Chen's Prius. He joined me on the porch, accepting a beer gratefully. "Thought I'd find you here," he said. "I have news. Good news, actually." "I could use some of that." "The FBI recovered another $1.2 million from Jennifer's offshore accounts. It's being distributed among her victims' families. Your share should be about $300,000. "Give it to the foundation. Margaret would want it helping others." David smiled. "I figured you'd say that. I'll handle the paperwork." We sat in comfortable silence, watching darkness creep across the landscape. Finally, David spoke again. You know what impresses me most about this whole story? Not that you exposed them or got justice. It's that you haven't let it make you bitter. Some people would use this as an excuse to trust no one, to close themselves off. You've done the opposite. I thought about that. It was true. Instead of retreating, I'd opened my life to new possibilities. Volunteering at the Veterans Hospital, teaching woodworking at the community center, even dating occasionally, though no one could ever replace Margaret. Bitterness would be letting them win, I said. Matthew and Jennifer took enough. They don't get to take my ability to trust, to love, to live. Margaret fought too hard for that. David finished his beer and stood to leave. For what it's worth, I think Margaret picked the right person to protect. Not everyone could have played the long game like you did. After he left, I remained on the porch, thinking about the journey from that rainy afternoon when security guards blocked me from my wife's funeral. The humiliation had nearly broken me. The betrayal had cut deeper than any physical wound. But Margaret had left me armor in the form of truth weapons, in the form of evidence, and most importantly, the knowledge that I was loved completely by someone who saw this coming and chose to protect me anyway. My phone buzzed. A text from Carol with a photo of the twins playing in Margaret's garden, which she'd lovingly restored. Mom's roses are blooming. The boys want to know if Grandma can see them from heaven. I typed back, "Tell them yes. Tell them she sees everything beautiful in this world, especially them." It was a lie, maybe or maybe not. Who really knew what happened after death, but I chose to believe Margaret was somewhere finally at peace, watching over us all. She'd earned that rest by fighting until her last breath. The stars emerged one by one, brilliant in the clear mountain air. I raised my beer to the sky in a final toast. We did it, Maggie. You warned me, protected me, saved me. Now I'm living the life you wanted me to have. Full of purpose, full of love, full of connections to good people. Matthew's serving his time, learning his lessons. Jennifer will never hurt anyone again. And your memory lives on in every person. The foundation helps every rose that blooms in your garden, every wave that crashes on Cannon Beach. You won my love. We won. A shooting star streaked across the sky, and I took it as her answer. Always the romantic my Margaret, even from beyond. I went inside, locked up carefully, and prepared for bed. Tomorrow I'd drive back to the house, to Carol and the twins, to the life rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. There would be work at the foundation classes to teach people to help. A future Margaret had ensured I'd have. The phone sat silent on the nightstand. No more desperate calls from Matthew, no more pleas for mercy from Jennifer. Just peace, hard-won, and precious. Before sleep took me, I thought about second chances. Matthew would get his in 25 years if the parole board agreed. He'd be in his 70s, his children grown without him, his life largely spent. But he'd have a chance to prove he'd learned something changed into someone better. I wouldn't be there to see it. The math was against me living that long. But I hoped Carol would be hoped she'd be able to look at her brother and see something worth salvaging. Jennifer would get no second chances. Serial killers who prey on family rarely reformed. She'd die in prison alone, and unmourned a cautionary tale about the price of pure greed. Her mother had recovered and moved to be near a cousin who'd take care of her. Even that small mercy was more than Jennifer deserved. As for me, I'd gotten my second chance the day Margaret's planning saved me from their scheme. Every day since had been a gift, an opportunity to honor her memory by living well, loving freely, and helping others avoid the trap that had nearly caught me. The 74 calls that had once filled me with rage now seemed pitiful, the desperate flailing of someone who'd gambled everything on greed and lost it all. I'd deleted them unheard, but their number remained etched in memory, a reminder of how far someone could fall when they chose money over family deception, over love. Sleep came finally dreamless and deep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make Margaret proud. But tonight, I rested in the knowledge that justice had been served, truth had prevailed, and love had proven stronger than betrayal. The man who'd been dragged from his wife's funeral had not only survived, but thrived. The son who'd orchestrated that cruelty had learned that some acts cannot be undone, some trust cannot be rebuilt. And somewhere between those two truths lay the lesson of our story that love prepares for betrayal. Not from cynicism, but from wisdom. That strength sometimes looks like weakness until the moment it strikes, and that the best revenge is a life lived well despite those who tried to destroy it. Margaret had known all of this. She'd prepared for it, fought through it, and won. Now it was my turn to carry that victory forward one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time. The phone stayed silent. The calls were over. The future beckoned. And I was ready for it. So I ask you now, have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to move forward? And what would you do if you discovered the person you loved most had been protecting you all along, even from beyond the grave? Share your thoughts below. And if this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to hear more tales of justice, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of true love. Share this with someone who needs to hear that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. Sometimes it's just the beginning of your greatest triumph. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, remember the greatest inheritance we can leave our loved ones isn't money or property, but the knowledge that we saw them clearly, loved them deeply, and protected them fiercely just as my Margaret did for me. May you find peace in truth, strength in love, and justice in patience.